Chavs have become the most demonised group in British society, lampooned by comedians, attacked by social commentators, and portrayed by the media as loud, vulgar and abusive, and increasingly seen as a drain on public finances. Chavs are the new underclass. The word chav was popularised in the first decade of the 21st century by the British mass media. It refers to an antisocial youth subculture in the UK. Subculture studies were first recognised at the Chicago School. They were later developed and recognised as forms of deviance and delinquency. Howard Becker explained that subcultures also result from the labelling process, where society defines people within these subcultures as outsiders, and these people are often perceived negatively due to the lack of conformity. This is also fundamental to a Marxist theory, which explains that the dominant class both produces and controls the dominant class ideas, values and beliefs of the society, which in turn legitimise the status quo by ensuring that the population as a whole accepts the inequalities of wealth and power as being justified and proper. It could be argued that from this, a subordinate class is ideologically deluded or mystified into conforming with a social order which runs counter to its true interests. So, for example, attempts by sections of the media to persuade us that the riots of 2011 were irresponsible and bad for the country could be viewed as the media taking an ideological role and operating on behalf of the interests of the dominant class. Studies in the UK of the scale of poverty began much earlier. Key researchers Rowntree, Townsend and Booth highlighted the grand scale of poverty. Charles Booth's 1899 poverty map of London was a first wake-up call and highlighted the large scale of poverty in London, and even influenced government intervention. Charles Murray was invited over to the UK in 1989 by the Sunday Times to investigate the underclass in the UK. His conception of the problem was illegitimacy, crime and unemployment. He argued the underclass was self-perpetuated and transferred through generations. It's argued that Murray used the underclass to pathologise the poorest people. The behaviour of chavs has helped the media to demonise them. Behaviours include all sorts of transgressive acts, smoking, spitting, swearing, to name a few. These negative traits are said to separate them from society and the rest of the underclass. There are many styles and brands that fit into the description of chavs. According to WikiHow, to be a chav you must wear a baseball cap, own some bling, wear a hoodie, smoke cigarettes and hang out in chavvy places. Let's take a look at the types of spaces this subculture can be found in. The space where chavs hang out are said to be shopping centres, car parks, or if it's cool, just to hang out on the street. Chavs can hang out in large groups in these spaces to look intimidating as part of their transgressive behaviour and to reaffirm their identity to the rest of society. They live in deprived neighbourhoods, often council estates with high rates of crime, unemployment and teenage pregnancy. But is it all as negative as the media portrays? In Owen Jones's book Chavs, he describes the strange case of missing child Shannon Matthews. Shannon Matthews was reported missing in 2008 in Dewsbury, West Yorkshire. The search for her became a major missing person police operation. She was later found in a house a short distance away. Shannon's mother, Karen Matthews, and Shannon's uncle, Michael Donovan, turned out to be behind the kidnapping in order to generate money and publicity. The media then turned on Karen Matthews and their community. Photographers pictured the community, the chavvy neighbourhood, and plastered it all over the tabloids to be shown in front of the nation. This caused many politicians to comment about the community, Conservative councillor John Ward caused controversy as he said there is an increasingly strong case for compulsory sterilisation of all those who have had a second child, a third, or whatever while living off state benefits. This was published in the Daily Mail. As the politicians and tabloids continue to turn on the community, the local councillor for Dewsbury commented on this, saying it was a shame the media didn't report on the community's strength. The media is constantly portraying negative images of Chavs. Owen Jones felt the Shannon Matthews stories was misrepresented by the media. Although Karen Matthews did kidnap her child for publicity and money, which is seen to be chavvy, the media forgot to tell the story about the community. The community raised money and made leaflets and was genuinely concerned for the girls' welfare, the local councillor reported. This is a good example of how a subculture who are labelled to be chavs actually aren't, by showing great strength and community support. The riots of 2011 enhanced moral panic society had on the underclass. Many took to the streets in loot and caused damage. The blame was placed by many on the underclass. Marxists would claim the blame culture around chavs is a disguise to hide wider issues within society. Marxists would argue that instead of focusing on chavs and their behaviour, how about looking at the bigger companies' behaviour, as these are the real criminals? In the UK, the recession caused a lot of unemployment, and to this day there are still cuts to welfare as a result. Whose fault was the recession? Banks. However, only one banker went to prison, whereas in the riots, many people went to prison for stealing just a loaf of bread or a pack of rice. Some would argue, what is that compared to worldwide recession? But bankers' behaviour isn't seen to be transgressive. So the big question is, what causes chavs to act in such a transgressive way? Karl Marx would describe it as alienation. The underclass are constantly rejected and unable to take part in society. As the world globalises, there are more and more trends and bits of technology to keep up to date with, which is increasingly harder to afford. The underclass will become more and more excluded from society if no one takes action. Rates of poverty in the UK have risen dramatically, according to statistics. Just over a quarter of the population is living in households below the low-income threshold set by the government. Mead would argue that the main problem is welfare. He argued most welfare systems encourage dysfunctions within society and welfare dependency. His solution, in order to fix the underclass problem, is to create a system where citizens have to work in order to receive benefits. In contrast, Wright argues that the underclass simply do not have access to the labour market and they do not have the opportunity for social mobility. His solution would be to increase education and opportunity through the welfare state so that the underclass have access to the labour market and are able to include themselves in society. To evaluate, the definition and representation of the underclass has definitely changed. People used to be proud to be working class and now they are demonised for being chavs. As we have seen, this isn't always the case. Not everyone lives up to this chav stereotype. Chavs need to stop being stereotyped and more needs to be done to include the underclass within society.